Human beings are no longer creatures of the physical world. We have outsourced our senses to glass and light. When you step onto an airplane, you don't check the physical flaps on the wings. You trust the digital dashboard. When a doctor monitors a patient, they don't just listen to their chest, they trust the glowing line on a monitor. We implicitly believe that a digital screen is a perfect, flawless mirror of physical reality. When the light is green, we know we are safe. But a green light is just a pixel. A pixel is just an electrical impulse, and an electrical impulse is completely controlled by code. What happens when a digital weapon learns that the easiest way to destroy a multi-billion-dollar facility is simply to show the operators a perfect green screen? Deep beneath a remote desert surface, thousands of massive steel machines were spinning at supersonic speeds. This was one of the most heavily fortified structures on the planet. Above ground, it was protected by anti-aircraft batteries, reinforced blast doors, and heavily armed military checkpoints. But down in the bunker, a nightmare was unfolding. The operators could physically hear it happening. Through the thick, concrete walls, they could hear the faint, muffled, terrifying sound of metal violently tearing itself apart. Yet, when they ran to the central control room, every single monitor showed a perfect green light. This wasn't a hypothetical simulation. This was the real-world Natanz nuclear facility in the year 2010. And the true horror of this facility wasn't the military guarding it. It was a digital philosophy called the air gap. The entire complex was completely severed from the global internet. No Wi-Fi, no external servers, no outside communication. It was considered an impenetrable digital fortress. You could not hack it from a basement in another country. It was the ultimate secure environment, until it became the site of a terrifying, invisible massacre. Despite the military-grade isolation, the massive steel centrifuges were not operated by hand. They were controlled by microscopic digital brains built directly into the machinery. This is the exact threshold where a line of digital code translates into the physical movement of thousands of pounds of steel. To monitor and update these systems, the human engineers inside the facility used standard computers running specialized industrial software. Because the system was entirely air-gapped, the only way engineers could transfer data or install software updates was by physically walking a USB flash drive from the outside world into the secure bunker. That tiny plastic piece of everyday consumer technology was the fatal vulnerability. An air gap is entirely useless if an invisible payload is carried across the reinforced threshold right in a technician's front pocket. An entirely unprecedented digital weapon was smuggled inside the facility. This wasn't a standard computer virus designed to steal passwords or display ads. It was a highly sophisticated, autonomous digital predator, armed with 4 hidden software flaws that even the creators of the operating systems didn't know existed. It was the digital equivalent of a bank robber having the master keys to every secure vault on Earth. Once a compromised USB drive was plugged into a single terminal inside the facility, the code silently woke up. It crawled through the internal isolated network, hunting for one specific target: the internal speed controls that regulated how fast the heavy metal centrifuges could spin. When it found them, the trap snapped shut. The code secretly hijacked the machines and began violently altering their speed. It pushed the delicate centrifuges up to extreme, dangerous velocities and then violently slammed on the brakes. The massive metal tubes began to physically warp, buckle, and tear themselves apart from the inside out. In any normal industrial environment, an attack like this would fail in 30 seconds. These centrifuges are incredibly precise and deafeningly loud. They are outfitted with hundreds of microscopic vibration sensors and pressure gauges. The absolute millisecond a single machine begins to wobble off its axis, physical alarms are designed to trigger. Red lights flash, automated safety valves lock down, and human engineers immediately slam the emergency kill switch to isolate the mechanical damage. To successfully destroy the facility, the digital weapon didn't just have to break the heavy machinery. It had to mathematically blind the human beings guarding them. Deep inside the bunker's central control room, the facility's engineers were staring at massive walls of security monitors. These screens displayed the real-time health, rotational speed, and vibration metrics of every single machine in the plant. In the physical rooms down the hall, hundreds of machines were screeching, metal was shearing. Rotors were shattering into jagged pieces of shrapnel. It was a catastrophic, violent mechanical failure. But when the panicked engineers looked at their command screens, they hit a terrifying cognitive brick wall. The monitors showed perfect, steady green lines. The pressure readings were mathematically flawless. The vibration sensors reported 0 anomalies. The digital dashboard proudly stated that the entire plant was running perfectly. The engineers hesitated. Their ears heard the faint, muffled sounds of physical destruction, but the multi-million-dollar digital monitors told them everything was safe. That hesitation loop was all the code needed. By the time the humans bypassed the screens and physically opened the heavy steel doors to the centrifuge rooms, it was far too late. Thousands of machines were permanently ruined. How did a piece of software completely silence hundreds of physical, mechanical safety sensors without triggering a single system error? When independent cybersecurity experts finally extracted the malicious code and tore it apart, they found a chilling forensic anchor. They looked at the digital readout of the security monitors. The readings weren't just normal, they were too perfect. Before the attack began, the code quietly recorded exactly 21 seconds of perfectly operational data from the physical sensors. When it was time to initiate the destruction, the code quietly severed the real data connection between the physical machines and the control room. It then took those 21 seconds of perfect data and played it back on a continuous, seamless loop directly to the engineers' screens. It was the exact digital equivalent of a Hollywood heist movie, where the thieves loop a pre-recorded tape over the bank's security cameras. The system was actively forcing the human beings to watch a movie, holding their attention hostage while reality was violently demolished in the background. The malware was eventually identified by global analysts and dubbed Stuxnet. When experts finally reverse-engineered the massive file, they realized the horrifying scale of what they were looking at. This wasn't written by a lone hacker in a basement. It was a military-grade precision cyber weapon. It is widely believed to be a joint black operation orchestrated by elite international intelligence agencies. The unparalleled complexity of the code and the absolute mastery of industrial hardware proved it was built by an institutional superpower with hundreds of millions of dollars in clandestine funding. They had achieved the impossible. They reached across a physical air gap and broke heavy steel using nothing but math. When the Stuxnet code inevitably escaped the facility and began replicating across the global internet, the entire international security community collapsed into a state of sheer panic. The rules of global warfare had permanently, irreversibly changed. Up until that exact moment in history, malware was a tool used for spying, stealing passwords, or destroying data. It lived exclusively inside the computer. Stuxnet proved that digital code could reach out through a glass screen, bypass human oversight, and violently destroy heavy physical infrastructure in the real world. The comforting illusion that our critical physical systems were inherently safe from digital tampering was permanently shattered. Stuxnet was the world's first true digital weapon, but it absolutely will not be the last. We live in a society entirely propped up by these hidden digital brains. They regulate the precise chemical mix in your city's clean water treatment plant. They control the massive, heavy turbines in your local power grid. They monitor the high-pressure valves in the natural gas pipelines running directly beneath your streets. We sit comfortably in our homes and trust the perfect green lines on our digital screens. But if a piece of code can perfectly forge the physical reality of a heavily guarded facility, what is stopping it from lying to the engineers running the power grid in your neighborhood? The next time you look at a screen that tells you everything is fine, remember the 21-second loop. Because a machine doesn't have to defeat you. It just has to convince you to look away.